Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the podcast with me, Jonathan Puddle. This is episode 78. My apologies for missing an episode last week. I actually had a really terrible migraine for probably about 24 hours, and so I was pretty much out of commission. But no worries. We've got plenty of exciting things in the can, and I'm going to share one of those with you today. This is my interview with Christopher Heuertz. Chris is the author of one of the sort of best-selling, best-regarded Enneagram books, The Sacred Enneagram, and he has a brand new book out next week called The Enneagram of Belonging, A Compassionate Journey of Self-Acceptance. Now, I was first introduced to Chris's work, as perhaps some of you were, through the Sleeping at Last podcast. The guy that Ryan keeps turning to is Chris Heuertz. And so I really was excited to get to talk to Chris and to dig deep into some of the philosophical issues surrounding the Enneagram, why people misapply it, and what turns off some people from the Enneagram and what we can do about that. And then to really kind of uncover some of his new language and the new lens that he's providing. So this is not strictly a primer on the Enneagram. It's more of a deep dive, I suppose, but it's really wonderful, and it pairs well with my interview with Jerome Libba on the psychology of Jesus. If you listen to that one, then this will be a good point for you to go deeper. So check this out. I hope you enjoy it, and there's links, of course, in the show notes to grab Chris's book and learn more about his work elsewhere. So I'm honored to get to talk to you, man. I'm pumped. I've been a fan for a couple of years, and I just love everything you're doing. I love your writing. I love your tone. I love what you carry. I'm honored to sit here on the other side of this connection.
Yes, appreciate you including me. Thanks so much.
Definitely. So there's a sentence like early into this new book that I really enjoyed. The Enneagram's 9 types offer us roadmaps detailing how we got lost or disconnected from our soul's purpose for being. I am a big fan of everything to do with the Enneagram, but I keep bumping into people who, for various different reasons that maybe we'll unpack, there's some kind of animosity or a closed-offness or a skepticism. And every time I say, oh, well, I'm so sorry, that's cool. For me, it's been this remarkable tool to personal transformation and really healing, reconnection with the core aspects of me, and for my vernacular, even I think the core aspects of God. And then everyone's like, oh wow, that maybe we can talk about that later then, because that sounds really interesting. And suddenly the conversation is open. So I was fascinated that you start off with that similar kind of this roadmap detailing how we got lost or disconnected. Where did that begin for you?
Well, I think I think that's a journey for a lot of us. I think we're always trying to find meaning and purpose and belonging. I think, the work that we've done over the years with young folks and actually not so young folks would primarily sort of circle around discernment, vocational discernment, or who do I partner with, or where do I move, or all these major life questions that I think a lot of folks were unprepared to sort of grapple with or sort of sort out. So my sense is we don't actually have to learn discernment. We have to remember that we've always sort of had what we've needed, and we've always sort of known. And what I believe we've always known is imprinted, let's say, into our soul, our essence, like I said, our creative purpose for being. And that's what I think the Enneagram is really fundamentally about, is remembering that, returning that, coming home to that.
You wrote also early on, there's this whole discussion around the popularization of the Enneagram and some of the benefits and pains of that. It got me thinking, even just like, I'm interested to know just how would you agree with this kind of analysis? I've been thinking through that the youngness of the tool, that it's more of like something that was discovered rather than created, like a categorization that was observed in nature rather than, someone developed this from nothing.
Yeah. So this is one of the conversations I actually love the most, and on sort of the landscape of where these discussions lead to, because yes, there is, let's say, rumored evidence of this showing up 7,500 years ago in ancient Egypt, or 4,000 years ago in prehistoric Korea, or 3,000 years ago with the Pythagoreans and the Greek mathematicians. And one of my teachers and friends, Michael Goldberg, actually writes that this shows up in Homer's work, the Odyssey, that the 9 stops basically that Odysseus makes from Troy back to Ithaca after the Trojan War is complete follow the energies of the 9 types, starting at point 9, counterclockwise around the circle in order. Now, clearly, we don't have proof or evidence that Homer was, or whoever Homer was, a collection of voices or an individual, was working with a personality profile system called the Enneagram back then. And so my sense is, yes, this is kind of like Joseph Campbell's hero with 1,000 faces. It's in us. It's trying to find its way out of us. It echoes and reverbs through history. Now, the trick is the personality aspect of it is just 49 or 50 years old, right? Mm-hmm. This wisdom teacher, this Bolivian man, Oscar Chasso, who just passed away actually a few weeks ago, in the 50s, 1954, he kind of had this download. He kind of had this experience. Either he visualized these things, or in some of the stories, he went into a 7-day hallucinogenic induced divine coma, and an angel came to him. Whatever it was, he received what he termed 108 enneagons. And when you stack these together, they became the path for the clarification of human consciousness or enlightenment. He spent 15 years developing these, and then in 1969 leaked 4 of them at this 10-month training in the deserts of Chile. There were 40 mental health professionals and Jesuits there. And Claudio Naranjo, who also recently passed away, brought those 4 back to Berkeley, California, and between 1971, 72, and 73 began to develop the Enneagram of personality. So we're fundamentally working with something that's about 50 years old, that may have ancient roots as a process teaching. And yeah, I think 50 years in, it is showing up everywhere. And there are these instant experts who've come across the personality overlay, and it makes sense to them intuitively. They can read it in themselves. They can read the energies in others. And as they've popularized this, I think on one hand, it's great. It's getting out further. But I also think on one hand, there's something lost in how it's been sort of thinned out in these sort of mugs and memes and t-shirts cultures that I think do reduce it to simply quirks and fail to sort of locate the depth of its possibility to lead us back to the memory of ourself or spiritual transformation. So yeah, it's an interesting time for this right now. And it's an interesting time because it's like, hey, we're about to, let's say, we're not going to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the personality profile, but we're 50 years in. And so what's exciting is it's a young teaching, actually. There's a lot to see in there that we've yet to sort of pull out.
Yeah, for sure. I put a question out to my Facebook people because a lot of my friends are really into it, and some are vehemently want nothing to do with the Enneagram. And I said, I think I phrased it like, those of you who are not into the Enneagram, what are your reasons? And they sort of boiled down to 3 major categories. The first one was, I don't like when people just say, well, you're a this and that means this, or I'm a this and that means you just have to deal with me. And it struck me that criticism I've heard made of everything, like of Myers-Briggs, of all kinds of different personality types of DISC. Well, I'm just a ENFJ, and so you have to deal. Which, isn't that the first lesson that everybody gets taught? That's not how these tools work.
Yeah, I mean, and that's actually a great way to reject how you're being introduced to it, if that's where people are leaving it, that, it just simply boils and reduces humanity down into sort of 9 buckets. It's like, of course not. And actually, if you kick this thing around and you sort of unpack it, it actually leads to 108 fluid and dynamic renderings of character structure, but that's not even the point. So yeah, I would agree with folks who would reject it based on it's reductionist, because that's I think a sort of subtle act of violence against the beauty and the mystery of humanity. And when we do that, we're not simply minimizing and diminishing our own mystery. We're doing that to others, and so yeah, it's unhelpful. So I'm down with that critique.
The next critique then is I was told that I'm one thing and one thing forever. And I didn't identify that much with what I was told I was. And either way, I don't like the idea that I'm boxed into one thing and I'm stuck. So you just mentioned fluidity. Unpack that.
Well, so first of all, I think what's also maybe tucked into that sort of protest is we shouldn't tell people what we think they are. I mean, this is really ours to come to terms with. And so if somebody's putting this on you, they're doing this wrong. The other thing is I'm lazy when I say this. I'm lazy when I say we're born our type. I don't think type changes. I do think we can loosen the grasp of how type fixates and creates addictive patterns that are unhelpful. I do think we can learn to have an honest relationship with our type, and I do think we can learn to live innocence beyond type. But you see, when I say we're born our type and I'm being lazy, what I actually mean is I do think that we're born to bring a healing gift into the world. Our souls have purpose and they are purposed. And, between the ages of 18 months and 3 years old, when you start to learn to pretend or tell lies or mimic your environment, this is when a so-called childhood wound sets in. And this so-called childhood wound disconnects you from that essence, from that purpose. And so the inevitability is we cope with that disconnection because it's a kind of psychic pain. And in the coping, we develop personality to deal with it. It's a defense mechanism. So yeah, you don't have to be a type 1 or type 2 or type 3 for your entire life. You could actually remember what your soul's purpose was, and you could actually try to do the hard work of reconnecting with that. And yes, your type structure is kind of there as scaffolding to help you remember, to help you return, to help you become less fixated and more free. So yeah, if you want to fixate on type, you can, and people do, they love it. But I also think that's missing the point. One of my teachers sort of says type can be metaphored similar to a prison cell. And she's like, I'm less interested in describing the thickness of my prison walls as I am turning these walls transparent, translucent, so that my essence can shine through. Mm-hmm. Well, there's a lot of us who love our type so much that it's like we're moving into that prison cell. We're decorating it. Like we're making it home. We think it's a life sentence, and it doesn't have to be. Mm. So again, yeah, that's fair. And that's kind of uninteresting. I mean, at a certain point when you're obsessing and loving your type, not having an honest relationship with it. And I'm not saying you should resist or reject type. Actually, we have to learn to hold it with tremendous compassion. But man, if you love your type, I think you've kind of maybe lost something, or you've taken it a step even further from what's ultimately been lost.
I think some people love their type because it's easier to love their type than to love themselves.
Oh yeah, it's a complete distraction from having to do that hard work of self-acceptance, of developing compassion, of making peace with everything and letting everything belong, the good and the bad.
Easier to fall in love with an avatar than an actual human being. Yeah. So do you think on that early childhood wound, do you think that it sounded like what you lean more towards the idea that our soul has a kind of an imprinted essence before wounding, whereas I've heard some sort of lean towards, based on the traumas that you experienced and you just kind of reacted this way, it's just the lessons your brain learned. Do you think we attract certain kinds of wounding based on a pre-imprinted typology, or where do you? Yeah,
my sense is your type is also, let's say, pre-conscious personality that's kind of hardwired, let's say, to your neurology or the sort of neurological grooves in your brain that sort of give you a bias for the basis of how you are going to see and perceive and process reality. In Enneagram, these are your three centers of intelligence, right? Your head or your thoughts, your heart or your feelings, or your body or your instincts. And, these are, in a sense, sequenced, right? So I lead with my instinctive intelligence and I support that rationally with my thinking. But that means I also repress my feeling center. And when you stack these three or sequence these three centers, you get 9 unique combinations. And so you see, this is how type is actually not even about personality. It's about perception, perceiving reality. So my sense is, yes, this is part of our neurology. This is prenatal. This is what we get to bring into the world, and it's not a curse or a disadvantage. It's actually and should be to our advantage. And that's where then I think whatever your so-called childhood wounds or traumas may be, they don't shape that. We bring that sort of preconscious bias for perception into how we deal with those real wounds or perceived wounds or traumas. Mm. And that's why you can line up, 7 children who've all experienced the exact same kind of abuse, let's say between the ages of 2 and 4 from a protective caregiver and get completely different personality styles. Sure. It's not causal, right? It's just what we bring to contend with the pain.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. I had this really fascinating experience that I'd be interested to share with you. I was going through a kind of a spiritual healing process with a counselor, and I recognize what I'm about to share is non-scientific, and that's fine. But I had what would essentially be sort of like a precognitive memory that kind of surfaced as somewhat of a vision, somewhat of a projection within my mind, and it was of myself at about, let's say, 3 or 4 months old, and I'm a baby. I'm in my crib, and I could sense my mother crying in the other room. And the feeling that I had was, if only I could help her. If only I could, encourage her, support her. Now, I identify very strongly with the type 2 traits. And that as I was encountering this memory, and again, obviously, whether this is a real memory that occurred in the life of Jonathan Puddle or not, I can't speculate. But, I can speculate all day, but I can't confirm. Either way, it felt really like that kind of early, someone was crying, and for whatever reason, my brain gravitated towards, if I could help, if I could love and care for that person, then maybe I would be loved, or then I would also be accepted, or then that person would be okay. And as I was kind of processing that memory later with my rational brain and the rest of my knowledge, I was like, man, that sounds so much like the descriptions of type 2 kind of early formative events, whether, as you say, whether the wound was real or whether it was perceived and so on. But even as I was thinking, I was like, what would have biased my mind to that approach, even if that did happen? And like you're saying, that there's already that neurological imprint that we each have uniquely based on how we develop. What do you do with thoughts like that? Precognitive memories, things like that in this kind of spiritual process.
Well, my first reach in when I hear these kinds of memories or visions or impressions or dreams is kind of appealing to a Jungian overlay that every aspect that we imagine in these symboled impressions or visions is really the disconnected fragments of ourself that we're needing to make peace with. And so, I don't gender protective or nurturing energies in a parent or a caregiver, but the symbology of the mother has traditionally aligned with that nurturing aspect of our early holding environments. And so when you share something like that, it's just like, is the crying mother, is the crying parent a symbol of your own, let's say, need to be nurtured, where you probably do, if you're dominant in type 2, nurture everyone and care for everyone better than you do yourself? And is this kind of a subconscious yearning to just learn to care for that tender part of yourself first, to say yes to yourself before yes to others? And I don't know. There might be something there to work with, because that's the problem for a lot of 2s is they deny their own needs. They presume they'll be met by others as you actually attempt to meet ours. But of course, that's not how relationships and love works. And so this leads to kind of a chronic sadness in a 2. And that sadness, I think, sometimes does show up in dreams or the impressions of there's a part of yourself that wants to be cared for, that needs to be tended to.
Yeah, well, certainly. I spent most of last year sitting on the couch meeting all these parts of myself and doing that work. And it's a beautiful, terrifying journey. So one of the things that you do in this work, the Enneagram of Belonging, is these affirmation, belief, and confession for each type. So, I immediately jumped in for type 2 and wanted to, see some of the lenses that you used here on this journey. And so this confession that you've produced for type 2s, I willingly release all obligations to my sense of indispensability. And I felt very provoked. Totally have wrestled for years with this deep sense of like, well, if it's not me, it'll be nobody else. Like, if I'm not helping these people, no one else is going to help them. If I don't pray, God won't move. If I don't stay here, who will care for them? Thankfully, I've done a lot of that work, so it's not like now I have no identity whatsoever. But yeah, the sense of indispensability has been huge for me. For a 2 who hasn't done this kind of work, where would you start to unpack? How do we leverage? Let's say, I'd love to hear more on the affirmations, beliefs, and confessions for each type. But where would you start to apply this tool, this journey?
Yeah. So that sort of ABCs of what you're referencing was my attempt to kind of, let's say, relanguage the traditional holy ideas, right? So the Enneagram of Personality is essentially made up of 4 of those 108 original Enneagons, and these 4 original building blocks are the virtues, the holy ideas, the passions, and the fixations. And in this age of instant experts, like who are really good at caricaturing type, my concern is that maybe we don't even have a grasp of the elements that build out type, right? I've been trying to kind of metaphor it like this, like, 15 years ago, my wife Felina and I made pilgrimage. We walked the Camino de Santiago, right? So 800 kilometers across northern Spain, and you look for a bed at the end of every day. You walk through these gorgeous little Basque villages in northern Spain, and in every little village you find a bar to get breakfast or lunch or your dinner. And at every little bar, right, they always would serve this Spanish tortilla, right? It's kind of a potato egg omelet, and it can be excellent, and it can be terrible. But man, when you have it right, it's like, man, that was on point. There's almost nothing better. So this past year, I've been trying to actually like make the perfect Spanish tortilla at home. And what's surprising for folks when you sort of set out to do this is it's actually only made up of 4 ingredients: potatoes and onion, eggs, and olive oil. And actually, when you sweat onions down, all 4 of these ingredients are fairly bland. So what you learn here in trying to make the Spanish tortilla is it's actually about understanding your ingredients. It's actually really important in terms of how you prepare them, and then the techniques of bringing them together can really make something fabulous or something terrible. So I think the same is kind of true here with the Enneagram of Personality. We have 4 semi-bland building blocks, and I think we don't know what we're doing with them for the most part. So the holy ideas, I think these are the most obscure, the most misunderstood, the hardest to wrap our minds around. It's almost the most undersussed, interrogated aspect of the personality system. Because when you look at type 2's holy idea, right, holy will, holy freedom, it doesn't mean what it says. And so I wanted to relanguage those. And like you said, I tried to relanguage those around affirmations. What is your holy idea affirming for you? A belief. What's actually the correct belief that's going to actually help you unfixate from your addictions? And then a confession. What do you need to let go? And when you look at the holy ideas like that, now all of a sudden they become alive. Now all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is what Ichazo meant when he said that these are the psychocatalyzers. That if this is the only aspect of the Enneagram you'd work with, it's enough. Hamid Ali, the man who started the diamond approach, what he calls these holy ideas is really our unobstructed view of reality. It's seeing the world as it should be, even if it's not yet there. And so my sense is your holy idea is really the invitation to reconnect with your divine mind. It is the first truth you have to tell yourself. And so for the 2, yes, your holy freedom isn't that you're free. It's that you are not indispensable. Like you're actually free from having to be the source of meeting everyone's needs. And that's, I think, true freedom for the two, right? So that's the unobstructed view. That's where the two actually gets to learn to live into the gift of their freedom. That, this sort of cliche need to be needed no longer is what drives and becomes a compulsive sort of push-pull in your relationships that is unsatisfying and difficult for all partners involved, right?
Yes, categorically so. So the ABC for type 2, you've expanded that. The affirmation is, I am a co-creator with love, which that moved me so much. It anchors me in such a place, like an expansiveness, whether you're someone, who describes himself as a Christian, or that you're in pursuit of love, or whatever that kind of language for you is, the idea that it's already there. It's already good. And I get to participate rather than have to create, am responsible for, have to create. It's on me.
Yeah, you're not the source of love, and love isn't dependent only on you. And in being a co-creator with love, what the two's also affirming is you simply aren't the initiator, but you can be a receptor in the exchange. And that's the bummer for a lot of twos. Like receiving can be so hard, it can be so shame triggering, it can cause such guilt to sort of come up in their sort of ego structure that. Nope, it's you're a co-creator in love. You give and receive, and that's actually how love is embodied and gifted into the world, into your relationships.
My wife and I are working right now on trying to create systems for me to more readily ask for help. I lay in bed 2 nights ago with a splitting headache, to the point where I couldn't get out of bed to go and get Advil or Tylenol, but she was asleep and I didn't want to wake her up. So I dealt with it until about 6 a.m. when I knew she was stirring, and I said, honey, could you please help me? And it turns out she'd been awake half the night because I came to bed really late. When I came to bed, she woke up and she was like, that was ridiculous. Like that was that's on you, that you should have asked for help 8 hours before. I'm like, yeah, I know. But one of the things we agreed to recently was for her to say to me, kind of at the end of every week, this was the language I tried to come up with, I think. What is it, husband, that you have taken responsibility for that you don't need to? That she can initiate that question of me, and then I can be like, okay, now I don't have to do all the work emotionally. That she's already come in there with that.
It's a bummer, man, for the poor two. Like that. So the bummer for the two is let's circle around this from another angle. Traditionally the passion for the two is pride, and it's like, it's not that twos are arrogant or prideful, but there's a kind of self-abnegating and denying of your needs that sort of for the two would say, I am self-sufficient. Like I don't need someone else to meet my needs, because like I've said, I'm here to meet yours. And that's also the source of the two's pain. And you can see now how this holy idea actually confronts that emotional passion, that way our heart suffers and aches or lost from disconnect. The holy idea actually brings clarity to that and shows us, no, actually asking is the most loving thing that a two can do for themselves and for their partner or those in their relationships.
Yes. Yes, amen. I'll take a quick pause to thank my Patreon supporters. I'm so blessed to have 50 different folks right now supporting me every month. They sow into this podcast, of course. This is a lot of my work right now, as well as my writing. Many of you will know, of course, that I have a book coming out very shortly, You Are Enough, Learning to Love Yourself the Way God Loves You. All of that work is really made possible by my Patreon supporters. So a huge shout out to everybody who gives each month, and a special mention for Lisa, Alistair, and Chanel, who have all come on since the last time I've thanked everyone. So huge thanks. And again, thanks to those of you who have increased your pledges. I'm so humbled. We have had people drop off, totally understandable because of their own financial circumstances. And I've had some really beautifully kind messages from people who had to drop off. And I've just been really humbled by those who've said, hey, I anticipate some people may be dropping, and so I would like to increase my pledge proactively. I do not say that to attempt to manipulate you. I am genuinely saying that to thank those people who did that. It's a blessing. And for those of you who had to drop off, please do not feel any shame or any regret. I totally have been blessed by your support for however long you've been with me. And your encouragement is just a huge gift. So thank you to everybody. I mean this from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much. Let's get back to the show. Could you walk us through then these expanded sort of, what you've grown from the holy idea, these ABCs for each of the types? We'll go back to type 1.
Sure. So I think for the type 1, this traditional holy idea that each also put out was holy perfection. And that's just such unfortunate loaded language for the one who thinks that they actually have to live into the idealized notion of perfection. That's impossible. It's impossible for them, and that's why the one comes to resent themselves. So I try to relanguage that like this, that for the one, your perfection actually is rooted in your imperfections, and that's actually the affirmation. You find completion in celebrating your imperfections. Your imperfections is what makes you human. It's what makes you beautiful. It's what makes you who you are. The belief here that has to, I think, be, there's a paradigm shift in reassessing what our fundamental driving beliefs are. And I think for the one here, it's there's compassion in intrinsically finding the perfection within you that drives you to love. But that's, again, rooted in your imperfection. And I think for ones, this is so important. Your imperfection is what makes you safe. It's what makes you beautiful. And so that's the confession, accepting themselves, their flawed selves, who they are as they are. And that's where the one learns to make peace and loosens their fixated personality system or personality psychic structure. That's a bummer for the one, but I think there's real freedom in the one, that you're perfectly imperfect is essentially it.
I accept what is as it is, starting with my perfectly flawed self. Very provocative for the ones in my life, I know. Mm-hmm. Type 3.
So traditionally for the type 3, this is where Ichaso just he expanded the holy idea. It was holy hope. It was holy law. It was holy harmony. And yeah, you can see how threes can be a source of hope. But I think this holy law piece is really important for threes to contend with, because essentially what it's getting at is this sense that you do not change reality. You cannot force your reality into existence, that you actually have to not go with the flow, but give yourself over to love. And that law of love is what will lead to the freedom for the three. So that's where we start this affirmation that you are changed, transformed, you are made complete in and by love. And for the three, I get kind of gooey, because the bummer for threes is this isn't the need to succeed. These aren't the achievers. These are the people that are the most obvious about how they go about getting the love they want. And as little kids, what was that? It was swapping affirmation and attention and recognition for love. Because you see, for the three, there's this deep fear that they do not have intrinsic value. So they attempt to make themselves more valuable, not to be successful, but to be lovable, right? So we have to start with, oh, you're transformed, you're changed, you're held in love, and that has to be this affirmation. I think the belief here is that there is this intrinsic value in all souls and all existence. And yes, we can see that for somebody else better than we can for ourselves. So when we say that this intrinsic value, dignity exists in all, we include ourselves in that all. And then this sort of confession is about, it's I embrace the permanence of a value that cannot be earned. And I try to say this 100 different ways for threes. You can't earn what's always been ascribed. Like, you just have to fall into the gift of who you are that's already valuable enough, that doesn't need to do anything to earn the love that you think you need. But you see, for the three, this is a hard work, because you see, for the three, that empty, repressed, neglected heart center is so empty, and it feels so hollowed out that it has a kind of voraciousness towards getting this love. And so this drive for earning value has never ever been about winning or losing, success or failure for the 3. It's always been about love. And that's hard. It's hard for 3s to admit that. But really should well such compassion up in all of us for the 3s in our lives.
It's definitely done that for me. I've been in ministry. I've pastored alongside many 3s, and I've seen such a hunger and desire, and like the eyes to see the beauty of everybody else, which is wonderful, but counterbalanced with this driven performance to earn and to be enough in themselves. And it always, I'm like, which is, I guess, true for all of us, right? Like, I mean, we've got to eat our own food. We have to, that's what Jerome Lebas said at the end of our interview. We've got to practice eating our own food. And there's something there you said too, that it really feels like for each of whoever we are, the work on our shadow and coming to wholeness, it's some kind of surrender, right? Like it's some kind of intentional. There's like an intentional giving up the fight to actually be with ourselves. It's like we have it all already. Like we have what we need inside us somehow. It's like I still struggle to find the right language for it.
Yeah. We don't have to look outside of ourselves to find what's always been true, and that's why, like, I think we sometimes reframe or remind or remember that the Enneagram is about remembering, right? It's coming back to that essence, that truest sense of self. Like I said earlier, our soul's created purpose for being.
Type 4.
So poor 4s suffer this fear that they don't know where their identity is rooted, and so it's as if there's this kind of tetherless angst of not belonging, of not connecting, of not sort of fitting in. And again, it's simply tied to how we want to be loved and how we don't feel like we are being loved, right? So traditionally, the holy idea for the 4 was holy origin. And this one makes a little bit of sense. Like, no, you have a place, but that's the affirmation that you are connected and you're connected actually to, and you're connected in love, and you're held in that love. So similar to this belief for the 3 that there's intrinsic value in all souls, I think for the 4, the belief has to be that there's a divine source in all souls and all life. And this source is actually that space of origin or belonging. And so then the confession here for the 4 becomes an admitting of your conscious compassion, your conscious need, your conscious realization for and of belonging. And again, similar to 3, it's something you can't earn. It's something that's ascribed. It's something that is. It's something that already was and it's always been. And so that belonging, that conscious compassionate belonging, that conscious commitment to saying yes to yourself is I think what catalyzes the 4 free from that fixation, that fantasizing, that longing, that dreaming there's actually something better than what the 4 actually has missed that they already have. So it's these things actually just they have to lead to such compassion, because it's so sad that we, in a sense, do this to ourselves, and we don't need to.
Yeah, absolutely. As I was digging into this work, I was reading, I don't know if you know Ondi Kolber. She's a trauma-informed therapist outside of Denver, and she's got a book out right now called Try Softer. And it's all about the sort of self-compassionate journey from a therapeutic framework and attachment theory and all those bits and pieces, and how to hold yourself with gentleness. And it moves into self-compassionate mindfulness and all these kinds of things. And it seems there's such an interplay between all of these things. But at the root of it is this, like, compassionate acceptance. Now, for me, I would root that in the Imago Dei. For me, that rooting is in God created humanity, and thus we have value, indescribable, inestimable. Where is that origin for you? What are those ideas? I know you described your faith to me earlier as kind of Richard Rohrian.
Yeah, I think I think the purest thing that all of us, if we were socialize in religious communities or are part of a spiritual tradition or a faith community now would affirm is that maybe the best metaphor we have for what we think the divine is love. And so I think that's what I try to do. Actually, even with these holy ideas, this notion of returning to our divine mind is rooting them in love, because all of our resistances, all of our fixated psychic structures, all of these emotional passions can't exist when they're held in love. They no longer have a defense against love. And so I think, when we look to the sacred texts and the sacred scriptures and we see this affirmation that God is love, I think that's a pretty simple, pretty profound and pretty resonant thing that we would all, I think, agree to. And you see this in the Enneagram, you see this in yourself, you see this in how we make it hard for ourselves. That it's actually our inability to love ourselves. And, this is the truth. Like, whatever your experience or idea or relationship to your notion of the divine is I'm pretty sure God wants to love you more than you want to be loved. Pretty sure that most of us are harder on ourselves than God is. And I don't think God is as hard on you as you have been on yourself out there. But that's because we don't understand love. We don't know how to love ourselves, hold ourselves with compassion, accept ourselves. It's because we project that even onto our image of the divine, that this sort of eternal, compassionate presence still has this bend in us or in it to punish us for simply being born the way that we were. And it's like, I don't know if that's actually how this works, So we project, I think, all of that dysfunction onto into our spiritualities, when it's actually just learning to make peace with it. It's actually just learning to like, I think I'm trying to say this in 9 different ways with these holy ideas, like to surrender, to fall into, to say yes to love.
Yes. Amen. I feel like some of these doctrines within Christianity, original sin and total depravity, have done more damage than we could ever come to really understand and ascribe. Like that we are somehow the exact opposite of what we are.
Yeah.
Type 5.
So 5's a little complicated because they complicate everything with their minds. And when Ichaso named the 5's holy idea, it was omniscience, or I can't say this word, omniscience, holy omniscience, like this sort of this drive. It's terrible for the 5, but this sort of drive to know all. And there's also this holy transparency that comes into the 5's ego structure. And I like that actually for the 5, because it's a kind of letting go. And you see this connects so well to the 5's traditional virtue, which Ichaso named detachment. And I'm fine actually appealing to all the traditional language Ichaso used, but I actually think that he maybe meant more along the lines of non-attachment, right? Because you can see the aloofness of someone detached in relationship, but the non-attachment is an affirmation. I'm rooted in love and I let go of any conditions or strings or exchanges that may come from that. And so I like this holy transparency as kind of a leading into that notion of non-attachment, right? So when we work with the 5's holy idea, what we're essentially saying is love is what holds everything together. This is what is coherent. This is the coherence of the 5's being, of the 5's living, of who the 5 becomes. The belief then is that truth can be found in silence. And I like to sort of throw this quote out there that, the first language of the divine was silence. That's where we actually learn to be and know that we are not the divine. So there's love in what isn't known. And that's really difficult for the 5, because the 5 really has this need to suss everything out and to figure everything out and to come to every conclusion and solution. And so I think the confession for 5's has to be, I am rooted in mystery. And that mystery is actually the doorway, the invitation to love. And this, you can see how, I didn't make the implicit, explicit, but when you're kind of rounding the circle of the Enneagram types, and you see how these types sort of bleed into each other like a color wheel, and I was trying to show a little bit of that between 3 and 4, you start to see this between 5 and 6, because you see 6s can be such a source of faith, but faith is making an option for the absurd. It's putting your hope in something that's unbelievable, unrealistic. And in fact, I actually don't think that you have to believe the things that you put your faith in. And I think the 6 takes that from this giving over to mystery that the 5 has to learn to live with.
Well, that's a really interesting point, because I think we've married faith and belief, and we've kind of said they're one and the same, or it's like, what do I believe? When you lay it out that way, like, you don't have to believe. That's the point of faith. If I believed this, it requires no faith from me.
Yeah.
How did we get so off on that?
Well, because, I know everybody sort of overplays this, but it's like, you've heard this 100 different times in 100 different ways, that doubt is not the opposite of faith. Certainty is the opposite of faith. But you see, I think we'd prefer to sort of make doubt the counterpoint, and so then we double down on certainty. And all the while, faith is actually lost. So joke's on us.
Type 7.
Well, type 6, I don't want to. I don't want to skip over 6, but I think, again, 6. So 6 and 3 in the Enneagram are considered the shock points, right? And these are the shock points because on our way down the two sides of the circle, when you drop below 3 to 4, and when you drop below 5 from 6, like it's almost like there's so much more space in that reach, right? Mm. You drop from this type 6 kind of over anxious, sometimes irrational, second guessing, constantly and chronically doubting person into the 5, a very certain, level-headed, cerebral person. You drop from type 3, which can kind of be image conscious and pivot and present as needed in spaces, down to 4, which is I am always going to be authentic to myself, even at my own detriment, even at my own isolation, even at the point that it causes me to be abandoned. And so that space is pretty wild, and these shock points are really important. 3 and 6 play. So 6 is another one of these where Ichazo had to kind of language this with holy faith, holy strength, right? And that actually, I think, is a really clear reminder for the 6 who does not have this sense of owning their courage to come back to it. So the affirmation here is you are courageous because of love, and love is what gives you that strength. Love is what compels that faith. And that's the point I was trying to make earlier. It's like fear can exist in the presence of love, right? And when the 6 gives himself over to that love, that's when they return to that holy idea. For the belief here, I think that the 6 has to come back to this notion that divine love is grounded in a compassion that liberates them from all the things that cause and wind up and support their anxiety, their concern, their restlessness, their fear. And I have compassion here for the 6 because you see all of that concern and that fear and that anxiety and that restlessness that the 6s sort of suffer is how they attempt to love us. They're going to those places. They're threat forecasting and contingency planning for us. They want to make sure that we're going to be okay. And they're not okay because they ingest and internalize and metabolize all of that. And so they don't have to. And that has to be sort of an alternate belief, a sort of reoriented perception of how they view and see the world. And of course, that confession then means they do make this absurd option for faith, that they believe beyond belief. They believe in something that I like I said earlier, that is better than could be imagined. They put their hope in something that is unimaginable, and that's faith. And that actually brings all of us into, I think, a more, at least I think a more, let's say like this, a faith that's framed and rooted in humility as the doorway we enter to as we approach it, so that we can be held by it. Mm-hmm. We learn that from the 6.
Yeah, that's good. Type 7.
So sevens, this is a real confusing one traditionally. It was holy wisdom, holy work, holy plan. And like all of those things mean something different and they say something different. And I think for a lot of sevens, it was like, no, not interested. Like, that's not me.
Doesn't
And
sound...
that's true. And that's partly why I wanted to kind of relanguage these things. So for the seven, we know this, the present moment is the most painful. Sevens are already somewhere else. They're preoccupied. They're anticipating what's next. That's why they can kind of see around the corner. That's why they're incredible sort of forecasters. And again, you see this color wheel. You see the threat forecasting into the seven, forecasting the possibility that freedoms will be diminished or limited, or that whatever it is that's bringing them satisfaction and joy in the moment will come to an end. And so the affirmation here is affirming that love can only be found in the present moment, that actually love is waiting for us now, that this moment is the only moment that matters, because the present contains every moment we have ever lived and is pregnant with the potential for every moment we may be gifted, right? So we affirm that love is to be found here, now, in the present. This belief here has to sort of lead them to the seven's need for restraint, the seven's need for contentment and constancy and a kind of, when you go to their virtue, sobriety, that there's enoughness even now. And so constraint actually is a gift. That's what actually leads to the seven's flourishing. And so this belief is actually tethered to this notion that constraint is what will give you contentment. That constraint, being constrained and held in love, is what is ultimately satisfying for the seven. And then we have this confession for the seven that is an affirmation of really the gift of the present, the enoughness of every moment, of now, that we don't have to run from now, that we can rest in now. And that's actually where we kind of cycle back to, because in this present moment, I am loved, because this present moment is loving, and because love can only be found in the present. It's not a memory that we can ruminate over from the past, and it's not something that we're hoping or yearning for in the future. If we can't experience it now, we'll never experience it.
Amen. Amen. Type 8.
Man, so type 8. So I'm dominant in type 8, and this is the work to do these ABCs for the holy ideas really came out of some profound humiliation in my own life a few years ago, probably 4 years ago now, where I actually was like, so if these are the psychocatalyzers, if Ichazo is saying that all I have to do is work with these holy ideas, and that's really the only aspect of the Enneagram that I need to know, then I was like, I wonder what that is. So I gave myself over to this notion of truth, holy truth. And it's like, the bummer for 8s is that we think we're speaking the truth in love, when in fact we're not speaking the truth and there's no love in it. We weaponize what we perceive to be truth, and we bully people. And this is why when I introduce 8s in Enneagram workshops, somebody comes up and says, yeah, I used to work with a really unhealthy 8. And I'm like, no, they were just an 8. You probably weren't standing up for yourself. They thought that they had to be truthful with you when there was no truth or love in it. So for the 8, this affirmation is an affirmation of self-compassion. It is, I am held in love through compassion. That compassionate love is what I need the most. And you see this takes a lot of the defenses down from the 8 who resist this, who resist being vulnerable, right? This notion of being woundable. My spiritual director taught me this years ago, right? The English word for vulnerable comes from the Latin word for wound. And so to be woundable is what we're getting at here, right? There's a belief for the 8 that we actually think is true, but it's a belief saying, I believe all truth comes from the source of love, not from my force of opinion or my sense of being truthful with you is loving. But no, it is what the source tells us that points us back to love. And so then the confession here is a confession of letting go. It's a returning to vulnerability. It's surrendering. I have to surrender to love. I have to be surrendered in love. And that's what that confession is getting at, is I am not sufficient. And you can see how this line that connects 8 and 2 sort of reverbs, fortifies, resonates that. But I surrender to love. And in surrendering, I submit. And in submitting, I am loved. And man, that's just painful. That's humiliating. That's devastating to the notion that the 8 actually is a source of strength.
Thank you for doing that work for us.
Oh man.
I know we're up against the clock, but type 9.
Yeah. So poor 9s. What's amazing about 9s is 9s are really the archetype of all Enneagram character structures. They sit at the top of the circle, kind of like a rising sun or a full moon, and we all kind of fall off the sides a little brighter and more intense up there at the top with 8s and 1s, and really withdrawn and really sort of suffering and carrying and shouldering the emotional and mental weight of the whole circle down there at the bottom with the 4s and 5s. So for the 9, this holy idea is returning to that source of love. It's actually learning to own that love. And so the affirmation is a simple cooperating and aligning with love. That similar to the 2, you're not the source of love, but in this sense of cooperating with love, you actually have to learn to cooperate with yourself and being loved. And there's a kind of minimizing of that in the ego structure of the 9. And so this leads to a belief that it is love that roots the 9. It is love that anchors the 9. And that actually has to lead to an awakening, a self-awareness of how I've forgotten to love myself. And this is the language that we sometimes use for the 9's passion, sloth, is a self-forgetting. Nope, this is a waking up. This is a remembering. This is a leading to self-awareness, self-acceptance, and compassionate belonging. And so the confession here, and this is really, I love this because I put this here for the 9 because the 9 sits at the top of the circle, and because we need to look to the 9 to become, it's a confession for all of us, but it starts with the 9. I am a source of love because and when I first loved myself. And man, I name that as a confession for the 9 because that seems to be so selfish for the 9 to say that I love myself. I need to love myself. I first love myself. But you know this, we can only love somebody as much as we've loved ourselves because we can only take people as far as we've gone ourselves in our own inner journeys and our own soul work and our own sort of spiritual practice. So this is what we get to do here, is to follow the 9 back to the source of love that they've always been.
I'm married to a very dominant 8, and so I can identify a bunch of those things that you said there for yourself. But one of the things for sure that I see with the 8s is a major capacity for growth. You know, for a passion for growth in themselves and a passion for growth in everybody else around them as well. But I just feel like you have channeled that growth desire and that truth and loveness for all of our benefit through this work, the Enneagram of Belonging, a compassionate journey of self-acceptance, and through your earlier work and through all the stuff that you're doing. I'm just really, really thankful for the work that you've done for all the rest of us, Chris.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I appreciate you having a chance to have a conversation like this about some of these things too. So,
anything else you'd want us to know about this book?
I will say this. I hope this is a gift to the larger Enneagram community. I hope this is a way of serving us. And I think you'll see this depending on sort of your own work with the Enneagram. This is either really a pushing the conversation forward by kind of relanguaging these original 4 building blocks, these original 4 Enneagons, by actually taking them inward, bringing them to the streets, and giving, I think, guidelines and rails for embodying what's hidden away in them. And so on one hand, I do hope this is a kind of a pushing forward. And on the other hand, I do hope this is a kind of throwback, a remembering, a returning, like, hey, let's actually know what it is that we're working with. Like, let's remember, like, there are some very core building blocks to the personality system. And if we don't know them, right, if I was like, hey, pop quiz, I'm going to put 4 Enneagram drawings in front of you, and I need you, to write the passions, the fixations, the virtues, the holy ideas around the circle. And if you couldn't, maybe this is a reminder that, nope, it's actually important to know. It's actually important to work with the fundamentals and work with myself and on myself with them first.
Thank you, Chris Heuertz. Make sure you guys go and check out the show notes to order a copy of his new book, The Enneagram of Belonging, A Compassionate Journey of Self-Acceptance. I have the advanced reader copy here on my bookshelf, and it is really wonderful. The book releases next week. I've been drawing from it already in some of my writing. It's really, really good. Go check that out. If you'd like to support the show, please do consider that. It would be a huge help and a blessing to me. This show is completely listener supported, and this show is basically my full-time work. You can go to patreon.com/Jonathan Puddle. You can join up for $3 a month. You can also join up for more if you'd like to. You'll gain access to a bunch of supporter-only podcasts, other secret writings, and various different things that I've shared. And ongoing, I peel back the curtain every little while and show what's going on behind the scenes. I let you know some of my secret upcoming guests, and I do stay in regular contact with all of my patrons. I also send out handwritten cards, which I think I'm supposed to do tomorrow. So, yes. Exciting times. Anyway, much love to you all. Grace and peace. I hope that you are doing well. Please let me know how you are. You'll find me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook @Jonathan Puddle, and of course, patreon.com/Jonathan Puddle. Much love to you guys.